Mahurin, who would later become one of the first American aces in Europe, created what came to be known as the boom and zoom tactic. Pilots referred to it as the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in typical dogfights, P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet, a height where German fighters struggled to operate effectively. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll over and dive. At these speeds, deflection shooting for the defending Germans became nearly impossible. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would unleash their fury. German pilots who made it through described it as encountering a wall of lead. The combined firepower formed an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in this deadly pattern did not just fall, they disintegrated. The true strength of American firepower was displayed on August 17, 1943, during a dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest strike into Germany attempted at that time. This mission showcased both the P-47's limitations and its terrifying effectiveness when used correctly. Major David Schilling, commanding the 62nd Fighter Squadron, faced a grouping of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft preparing to attack B-17s with their heavy cannon and rocket armament. The twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less agile, were the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Messerschmitts who survived, later recounted in an interrogation, "The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. I landed good hits. I could see them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft in front of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitts were destroyed in less than a minute. The German pilots had never witnessed such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At the convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone about 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faced 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was astonishing. American industrial strength was on full display. While German fighters struggled with limited cannon ammunition, typically only 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, American pilots could fire for more than half a minute. Their standard combat load combined armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and regular ball ammunition. This mix was designed to destroy and ignite targets. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who became the leading American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the devastation. He said, "When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode." He witnessed a Messerschmitt 109 literally cut in half, with the tail falling one way and the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe faced a chilling realization about the P-47. Its performance improved significantly at higher altitudes, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine kept its rated power output up to 30,000 feet. In contrast, German fighters, relying on single- or two-stage superchargers, saw their performance decline above 25,000 feet. Lieutenant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's top aces with 206 victories, encountered the harsh truth on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. The BMW 801 engine, strong at medium altitudes, struggled for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the ground. When P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters became easy targets. Robert Johnson, an experienced combat pilot on his way to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf adorned with elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was precise. He opened fire at 300 yards with a 30-degree deflection angle. He observed strikes all along the fuselage. The enemy aircraft exploded and no parachute was seen. Philip's death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both the eastern and western fronts, could not withstand the Thunderbolts, what chance did the average pilots have? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report delivered to Reich Marshal Hermann Göring in November 1943 revealed sobering facts. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling surpassed 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could manage. The fighter could achieve impressive dive speeds, nearing the sound barrier. Its armor included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most troubling was its sturdy design, which allowed it to withstand damage that would incapacitate 3 regular fighters, yet still make it home. In January 1944, a new version of the P-47 arrived in England. This marked the shift from a mockery to a true fearsome opponent. The P-47 D-22 came with a Hamilton standard hydrostatic propeller that had 14 feet diameter paddle blades. These design changes allowed the plane to climb more effectively. Previous Thunderbolts reached only 2,200 feet per minute at sea level. The new paddle blade models could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or surpassing German fighters at most altitudes. The large propeller also enhanced acceleration, enabling the P-47 to gain energy faster in level flight. On February 10, 1944, Hedman Heinck Kocher of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered these new models while intercepting bombers near Hanover. He noted in his combat diary that the fat American fighters have learned to climb. They engaged a formation near Hanover, expecting their usual advantage, but to their surprise, the Americans climbed right alongside them. When they tried to retreat, the P-47s followed them up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and completely destroyed, reduced to nothing but smoke and debris. These were no longer the same machines they had laughed at the previous year. The paddle blade propeller not only improved performance, but also altered the Thunderbolt's sound. The thunderous roar made by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds could be heard from miles away. German ground troops began to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone. They described it as a deep rumble that signified imminent death. They coined the term Donnerschlag thunderclap for it. By March 1944, P-47s fitted with external fuel tanks were capable of escorting bombers deep into Germany. The standard setup included 2 108-gallon wing tanks, or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending their range beyond 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller ensuring better performance even when carrying loads, Thunderbolts could engage in combat immediately after dropping their tanks. The Luftwaffe responded by focusing on attacking the bombers, aiming to inflict enough losses to halt the American daylight bombing campaign. Flying into the P-47 escort screen was becoming a deadly mission. German pilots began to develop a respect that turned into fear for these large American fighters. Major Georg Anton Rahl, one of Germany's leading aces with 275 victories, primarily on the Eastern Front, had a harrowing encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944. He was left severely injured after the encounter. In a post-war interview, he recalled, "We saw them above, bulky silhouettes against the sun. Someone joked, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could respond. The first pass wiped out 3 of our fighters, turning them into burning wreckage. Their guns did not fire in bursts like ours. They unleashed solid streams of gunfire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death." The escort missions highlighted another advantage of the P-47, endurance. German fighters used maximum power that quickly drained fuel. Meanwhile, the large American radial engines cruised efficiently at high altitudes. Thunderbolts could accompany bombers for hours, rotating top cover while conserving enough fuel for combat and return. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived for long-range escort duties in the spring of 1944, P-47 units increasingly shifted towards ground attack missions. This role would make them one of the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition gained momentum in April 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery was just as effective against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary rounds could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the overwhelming volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst could send 160 half-inch projectiles into an area the size of a truck. However, it was the addition of bombs and rockets that turned the P-47 into a true multi-role powerhouse. The D-25 variant could carry two 1,000-pound bombs under its wings and a 500-pound bomb under its fuselage, a payload comparable to early war medium bombers. Later versions added zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand. They came in low, so low that you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. The engines roared while rockets screamed through the air. Screaming filled the air. The heavy machine guns hammered down. A line of our trucks simply vanished. 20 vehicles turned to smoldering wrecks in an instant. The impact on our men was overwhelming. They called them Jabos, meaning fighter bombers. Yet these were beyond what they imagined. They acted like flying artillery, hitting with sniper-like precision. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe realized how far the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air support for the invasion, creating an almost impenetrable shield over the beaches. German fighters trying to reach the landing zones faced destruction. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader 21, one of just 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, said the sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts filled the sky from sea level to 30,000 feet. We attempted to break through at dawn with 12 fighters from our group. I was the only one to make it back. The P-47s awaited us at every altitude. There was no climbing over them or diving under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum shards. In the weeks after D-Day, P-47s systematically wiped out German movement during the day. The numbers were astonishing. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts destroyed 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles. The Wehrmacht had to operate only at night, crippling their response to Allied advances. The Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt danger. They reinforced vehicle armor, used more anti-aircraft guns, and developed new camouflage. Nothing succeeded. The P-47's mix of speed, armor, and firepower made it nearly unstoppable. Even the dreaded 88mm flak guns struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitudes. While wreaking havoc in Europe, the P-47 also proved its value in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, based in New Guinea, found the Thunderbolt's capabilities were ideal for the vast distances and tough conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, leading the 348th, crafted tactics for the Pacific fight. On October 11, 1943, Kirby directed 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, shooting down 6 enemy planes himself in one mission, earning him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese were used to fighting differently. The nimble yet delicate American fighters were not ready for the P-47's mix of firepower and resilience. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who faced the P-47s over New Guinea, later described them as monsters. He said their 20mm cannon, which could take down a P-40 with just a few hits, seemed ineffective. He fired dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. The return fire was terrifying. Streams of heavy bullets tore aircraft apart. The P-47N, designed specifically for the Pacific, had enhanced fuel capacity with wet wings that held 93 gallons each. This increased the range to 2,350 miles. This variant escorted B-29s to Japan, demonstrating that the short-ranged fighter of 1943 had transformed into a genuine long-range weapon. Perhaps the ultimate proof of the P-47's advancement was during its encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with a top speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been out of reach for propeller-driven fighters. However, Thunderbolt pilots found they could catch the jets during two key moments: takeoff and landing, when the jets were vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Muir of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to shoot down an Me-262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Muir's Thunderbolt hit speeds close to 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, certain of his speed advantage, never spotted the diving P-47 until Muir opened fire at 400 yards. Muir reported that the enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, broke away from the fuselage. The pilot did not survive. The concentrated fire of 800 caliber guns was more effective than anticipated against jet aircraft. By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to deal with German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and improved aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could achieve 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept jets in certain situations. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron, equipped with P-47s, shot down two Me-262s in March 1945. His tactical report focused on firepower over speed. He noted that while the jets are faster, they struggle to turn and withstand damage. One good burst from our guns, and they fall apart as if made of paper. They need to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we can catch them. The ultimate showcase of American industrial strength happened during Operation Bodenplatte. On January 1, 1945, the Luftwaffe made a frantic attempt to eliminate Allied air power. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their top pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields in Belgium and the Netherlands. At the Y-34 airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially worked. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot taken to the command post pointed to the burning planes and mocked, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brookings' reply became legendary in the 9th Air Force. He pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already moving damaged planes aside and prepping for new ones. He said, "By tomorrow, we will have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The smirk vanished from the German pilots' faces. Within 48 hours, brand new P-47 D-40s filled the flight line. These planes were flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots during Bodenplatte. This included many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. These losses would never be made up. The Americans lost 134 aircraft in total at all attacked airfields. All were replaced within a week. The numbers highlighted their inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour, day and night. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built on empty farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft each month by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone had 2,400 components, machined to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch. Yet, American workers, many of them women who had never seen an airplane before the attack on Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision beyond peacetime standards. Ammunition production was equally impressive. Each P-47 mission needed 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, with hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily. Ammunition consumption surpassed 10 million rounds each month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri produced 30 million rounds of ammunition every month. Each cartridge was crafted with precision to ensure reliable functioning in the synchronized gun mechanisms. The fuel usage was substantial. Each Thunderbolt consumed 100 gallons per hour during regular flight and up to 300 gallons in combat with water injection engaged. By late 1944, the 9th Air Force alone was using over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly. All of this fuel was transported across the Atlantic in tankers that were made in American factories. Even more remarkable than the production of aircraft was the training of pilots. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots each year from advanced training, a number higher than Germany's total pilot training throughout the entire war. Each P-47 pilot went into combat with at least 400 hours of flight training. This included 100 hours in advanced fighters. In contrast, German pilots were entering combat with less than 100 hours of experience by the end of the war. The difference in quality was evident in battle. American pilots arrived in Europe well-trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They had even practiced against captured German aircraft, gaining insight into their enemy's capabilities and weaknesses. American pilots were familiar with their aircraft systems, having studied technical manuals that German pilots never had access to. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September 1944, showcased the advantages of American training. He had 420 hours logged, including 75 hours in the P-47. He had practiced shooting at towed targets, worked on deflection shooting, and reviewed gun camera footage from actual combat. When he went on his first mission, he felt prepared. The German pilot he faced did not have anywhere near his experience. It was clearly an uneven match. In March 1945, Oberstleutnant Sepp Priller, the same pilot who had once ridiculed the P-47s as pregnant cows, was interviewed by German propaganda officials who were trying to boost morale. His comments, deemed too discouraging for publication, highlighted the significant change in the German perspective. The Thunderbolt is the finest fighter bomber ever constructed. Its firepower is unmatched. Its weapons do not jam, do not overheat, and do not run out of ammunition in typical combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and can engage in dogfights like a fighter when necessary. But beyond the aircraft, it symbolizes something greater: the boundless production capabilities of the United States. They lose 10 and they build 20. We lose 1 and it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training and ammunition for practice. They have spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage. But courage without resources is just a delay before defeat. We laughed at them in 1943, but we're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has arrived. The sound is haunting. It is mechanical, precise, and unstoppable. Like everything American, it relies on overwhelming material superiority. They did not defeat us through better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under a mountain of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed mostly on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most of their aircraft. Experienced pilots were either dead or captured. Airfields were crumbling ruins. Even if they had aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible challenge. Attacking meant confronting P-47 formations that dominated every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brechner, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted just 12 seconds. I saw them diving down, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to maneuver, but they were too quick. Their leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook as if it had been hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded and the wing broke off. I barely got away. In the parachute, I watched them destroy my entire team. 6 fighters were gone in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological effect was complete. German pilots developed what medical staff called jabo fever. This was a physical response to stress that appeared whenever Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. The unmistakable sound of approaching Thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops, who knew they had to find cover immediately. The final statistics of P-47 operations were astonishing. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat. 3,315 aircraft were destroyed on the ground. 86,000 railway cars were destroyed. 9,000 locomotives were destroyed. 6,000 armored fighting vehicles were destroyed. 68,000 trucks were destroyed. 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles were also destroyed. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat, 150 aircraft were destroyed on the ground, and 1,500 vehicles were destroyed. 150 locomotives were destroyed, along with countless barges, ships, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, using primarily P-47s, conducted 213,873 combat sorties. They dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. The Thunderbolt units achieved an impressive kill ratio of 4.6 to 1 in aerial combat while having the lowest loss rate among Allied fighter bombers. However, these statistics mask the severe human toll. The Luftwaffe suffered around 28,000 pilots killed in combat against Western Allied forces. Many fell to the intense fire from American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replenish. By the end of the war, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience. In contrast, the average P-47 pilot boasted over 200 hours. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center in Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence. Records obtained in 1945 showed German evaluations of Allied aircraft. The file on the P-47, updated throughout the war, depicted a complete shift in perspective. In April 1943, it was labeled a large, unmaneuverable fighter that was inferior to German models in every performance aspect except dive speed. Its machine gun armament was seen as inadequate against cannon-armed fighters, and the assessment deemed it a minimal threat. By December 1943, evaluations noted exceptional high-altitude performance and extreme structural strength. Firepower was becoming increasingly concerning, and pilots were adapting their tactics. The assessment changed to a significant threat above 25,000 feet. By June 1944, the P-47 was recognized as a dominant fighter bomber, superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Its firepower was devastating against all target types, and its structural strength made it very difficult to shoot down. The evaluation stated it was a critical threat at all altitudes. By March 1945, it was labeled the best fighter bomber of the war. Its combination of firepower, durability, and performance was unmatched, and the quality of pilots was exceptional, making it unserviceable in direct engagement. In 1985, during a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former opponents came together peacefully. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, who had led the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His response, captured on video, revealed his complete transformation in perspective. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We looked at this big, heavy fighter and laughed. We believed the Americans did not understand air combat. We thought they built a bomber and called it a fighter. It turned out we were the ones who did not understand. The Americans did not attempt to develop a European fighter. They created an American aircraft focused on production, firepower, and survivability. They realized that in a war of attrition, the plane that could withstand damage and deliver powerful fire would come out on top. They were right. When I first flew a captured P-47 after the war, everything became clear to me. The power was astonishing. It climbed as if it were soaring upward. The cockpit was comfortable, the visibility was excellent, and the controls were precise. It was an aircraft for pilots, encased in armor. What truly amazed me was knowing that America manufactured over 15,000 of these intricate machines while engaged in a two-ocean war. Each required an engine more complex than anything Germany had produced. Yet, they built them faster than we could produce basic fighters. That realization made it clear we never stood a chance. Those guns we named Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you would never forget it. Many of my friends experienced it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it obliterated it. The P-47's design exemplified American industrial philosophy flawlessly. It was brutal force engineering supported by limitless resources. Every part was overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount could handle 12 grams forces. The control cables were reinforced with automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system was a marvel. It consisted of 8 separate boxes, each holding 425 rounds, powered by electric boost motors to prevent jams during maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to avoid freezing at high altitudes. Each had its own charging mechanism and could be synchronized individually. The convergence settings ranged from 150 to 400 yards, allowing pilots to tailor their engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans argued that the P-47 won due to quantity, not quality. They claimed German fighters were technically better but outnumbered. However, combat records tell a different tale. In battles where numbers were equal, P-47s consistently emerged victorious. The heavy machine gun armament, dismissed as inferior to cannons, proved to be more effective in actual combat. Analysis of gun camera footage showed that while cannon shells were more destructive individually, they needed precise aim and had limited ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds in total. The P-47's armaments created a dense cloud of bullets that ensured hits, even with less than perfect aim. At standard combat distances, a 2-second burst fired at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target. This was enough to guarantee total destruction. The ammunition used was notably advanced. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds had a delayed action fuse, allowing them to penetrate before exploding. The incendiary material burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, though heavier, often detonated upon contact, causing impressive but occasionally shallow damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds surpassed the total weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine generated more power than entire formations of bombers from the previous war. Its firepower equaled that of an infantry squad. Still, it was built in vast numbers, piloted by young men fresh out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who learned their skills in just weeks. German perceptions shifted from mockery to fear in less than 2 years. During that period, the once-mocked fighter became the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s quietly for decades after the war. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D stands alongside other legendary fighters. Its placard displays specifications and battle honors, but the true story is shown in a small display case filled with spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film depicting a Focke-Wulf 19D disintegrating under fire. Below the display, there's a quote from an unnamed German pilot in a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them, those fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just aimed those guns at you, and you ceased to exist." The laughter died along with our comrades. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as a target of scorn and ended the war as a tool of destruction. In that time, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns changed the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under a storm of lead. German pilots had laughed at the cumbersome American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots remaining to find humor. The Thunder had made its presence known, and the sky was dominated by America.